So my name is Kerstin Drechsel. I'm an artist living here in Berlin since more than 30 years. That means since 1988. 1 year before the wall came down, I moved here to Berlin and to do my studies here. I studied stage design at the University of Arts here in Berlin. And I met many people there. It was a quite different time to nowadays, for example, because Berlin was more or less a sort of enclave, surrounded by the GDR, and we very often went to the eastern part of Berlin to go to theater or to go to exhibitions or just to buy color. Because it was cheaper, and also to the bookshops and so on. Berlin was for me the space or the place where I wanted to be, because I felt it's the only, at that time it was the only city in Germany where you can be like you are. In the streets, everybody is rude and just shouts to you, very unfriendly, but it was completely okay, because it did not matter how you look like, how you behave, and so on. So you have been able to be very free here in Berlin, and as well, the living costs have been very, very low. And for me it was quite important as a student to be here without doing jobs too much besides of my studies. That changed in a way after my studies, because when I was studying I thought, okay, I can live from my art, very naive. And some years later I realized, okay, it's not the point. I can never live from my art, I expect, so I have to do something else. But at the same time, I always understood making art as a big, big privilege. Not being said by someone, okay, you have to do this, but just say it to myself, or looking around with whom can I collaborate in the field of arts, but also in the fields of thinking. Even if I studied stage design, I only very seldom worked as a stage designer. I sometimes did it for having some extra money, but the main time I had other jobs, for example, working in a cinema, just selling tickets. So it was quite nice, because it was an art cinema, that art cinema of Berlin, in which I worked for a couple of years, not a couple, like 12 years, the Cinema Arsenal. And there I met more or less the whole scene or cultural scene of Berlin, and where I talked to everybody more or less. So I had the time in my studio space to work on art. And then an artist group we founded to do collaborative work, and then working in the cinema to, it's to be on the having, like a quotidien space, which is not like being somewhere, but being really on the bottom and realistic, and also having a place to communicate in a quite nice and normal way. Later on I had the really big privilege to have some teaching jobs in university, as a lecturer, as an interim professor, and since nearly 1 year now as a full-time, I have a full-time professorship, not here in Berlin, but in Leipzig. It's also a big town, like 1.5 hours from here by train. And for me it's very important to to have this connection to the young generation, because I myself have no children. I am a lesbian. I'm living with my partner since more than 30 years now, and but I like to be in conversation with different generations of people. So I really enjoy being in contact with these young students. I have to have a look on the paper what if there is another point. Well, how to say, so I don't know if I have a mission. I think a mission is too hard for me to explain or to have, because, for example, I'm a person who's thinking politically, but I don't want to have a sort of phrase or mission in my work, even if I would say that it is influenced by my thinking. I don't do art because I want to do a political statement. It's the other way around. I'm artist, and in political interests come into my work. But artist normally has more different levels and is not only like a one-level argument for something. Well, I'm engaged with my country. It's a really, for a German person, perhaps a really hard question, because when we have grown up, my mother was child during the Second World War, for example, and we always have been been ashamed to be a German. So I'm never said I'm from Germany. I normally say, okay, I'm from Hamburg or I'm from Berlin. I'm born nearby Hamburg, and like I said, I live more than 30 years here in Berlin. So I'm a Berliner, but German. Okay, I am German, but I'm not so proud of it. And well, the neighborhood is Berlin in a way, but I understand also other countries as a neighborhood. For example, I had again a big privilege to have a scholarship at Paris in 2006. And there I met people from everywhere, and it was very, very nice. To whom am I speaking? I'm speaking to everybody. I don't want to make art for a certain group, but at least for every person. And perhaps some of my works you can find easier a way into it, even if you have nothing to do with art. Other works are perhaps a little bit more complicated to come in if you are not in this thinking of artistic doing. But I always try to make stuff that is for everybody. I'd have to look on the paper what's on there too. I live in Berlin on the one hand, like I said, with my girlfriend, and I live also in Leipzig because I'm teaching at the Academy of Arts in Leipzig. And I don't really have so many ideas for this question, unfortunately. Yeah, okay. Where am I speaking from? I'm speaking from Berlin, I would say, from Berlin being an artist. And now I'm here in the Kunstverein Tiergarten, Galerie Nord, a place that I really love because of this, the space itself. It has so big windows to the outside, and it's an area here where many different people live. Many people whose origins are in Turkey or in Arab countries, but also quite a mixture of people, and it's not such a very rich district here. And it's really funny because very often in the evening people sit outside and are looking inside, what is going on here? And it's so they participate in a way, but sometimes they don't want to come in. Nevertheless, they see something. So it's always fun if you build up something here in this space. Last year I participated in a show I put some of my works, and it was a really long time I had to build up the show, and therefore I know very well the place. Where am I also speaking from a privileged position? I already said, because it's different if you have to think about where comes the money from every day. I had this situation in my past that I had often not very safe jobs. Fortunately, I had jobs, but not all the time. I did not always know where am I living from. For 2 months I knew, but not for the next 2 months. So but it was possible in Berlin to have this sort of life. But now, because I'm a little bit older now, I'm happy that I have not this unsecure situation anymore. What else was in there? It was about the commitment. I just spoke a little bit in the first question about the commitment or a message. I don't really know how to make this difference between commitment and message. And I also spoke about collaborative projects. Perhaps I just talk a little bit about an artist group we founded in 1996. So it's a really long time ago. We still exist. It's a group of, in the beginning, we have been like 15 or 16 artists. Meanwhile, we are 8 or 9. And we formed this artist group, mainly women and 1 man. At that time, queerness was not so developed like it is today. But parts of us are queer, but it's not the direction of the group. The direction of the group is living and architecture and city planning, but we are all artists, and we wanted to make exhibitions that do not depend on curators, on institutions, on gallerists or anybody else, but we wanted to be our own chefs and say we do what we want to do, And we want to be a platform to make our artistic position visible, but also to invite people to participate in our projects. So in our beginning, we made an exhibition in a parking lot here in Berlin, a parking house with like 10 étagères, and we saw it as a city in a shelf. The whole concept was made by us, but everybody had nevertheless a single position in it. So that was in a way our manner to work in our beginning years, because for us it was a possibility to make us known in the city. The 90s have been the time of artist groups here in Berlin, and also the time of pop-up exhibitions and places, because after La Chute de la Mure there was the possibility, empty rooms have been popped up as a Monday bar, another one as a Tuesday bar and a Wednesday bar and so on, and it was always combined with an exhibition just for one day, one evening or 1 week. So it was a very vivid time in Berlin, and we joined in with being an artist group and make us known to the people here in Berlin. And we all profit from that time, because really those people who have been in juries then and in the cultural government, not cultural government, but a sort of cultural government here, they always know our names, and we got very much support of the city. For example, for doing catalogs or for doing our exhibitions. And after this first exhibition, an artist group from Mexico City invited us to go to Mexico City and do an exhibition there. So we made our network to Mexico City and so on. There have been some other passages, for example, to Hoyerswerda. It's a town badly known because there have been sort of pogroms against refugees very badly in the in the 90s, and we made a project there. It was a shrinking city in the time of the 90s, and the people living there have been very desperate, because it was a planned city, a typical example in the former GDR of a planned city giving much comfort to everyday life. And in the 90s, these comfort zones have been crashed down because the city was shrinking too much. That meant they lost in a way their home buildings, some of the people. And there was an artist group who grew up in the city, who organized a big cultural festival, and we have been invited to do something there, normally to do like an exhibition in a former prefabricated building. But we said, no, we don't want to make an exhibition as an exhibition. We want to accompany or to be witness of this demolition of the prefabricated houses. And so we made several works about this demolition of the houses. And for us it was a political aspect to do like this. and so on. Our last big project was that we decided to work together, not doing just the concept together and the frame, but really inventing work where everything is invented by the whole group. It was a problem, but it was also good because many of the participants wanted this since many years. I just thought perhaps I have to say something about my own practice, but it's in the following question, I think. But so the collective, why the collective? On the one hand, to be independent, on the other hand, because we thought it's also very good to be always in contact to people who also do art, not being just an artist hidden in the studio, but going into the city, showing site-specific work, and also to talk with people in between the artist group, but also to other people and artists in the city. Okay, so there are several points. On the one hand, I start with the university because it's also my work. It's perhaps not my artistic work in a direct sense, but it's also, if I wouldn't be an artist, I could not do this job. And because we just talked about safe spaces in our apart conversation, I thought about that nowadays, this question having safe spaces also in universities are much more common than in former times. During the times when I studied, it was quite typical. Not my own professor, but other professors said to the students, to their female students, "Oh, I like the most when I see you from backside, when you hide your work, and if I see your ass." It was quite common to say such awful stuff like this. My own professor did never do anything in that direction. But I know that it is and was common also nowadays, and we had also a scandal at that school on which I'm working on now. The scandal is like 3 years ago, and because of, I don't really know the word in English, Übergriff, because of this Übergriff, the students have started a rebellion against all this. The professor had to leave the school, and they have been much more aware of feeling good and comfortable with studying situations. And therefore, they install something like safe spaces for everybody. They want to have a look on that queer persons are not discriminated, and people with a refugee background or also coming from other countries are not oppressed, and so on. So I'm very happy about this, that the young generation is so aware about this. Perhaps I have to say in the art context, I don't know if it is a common thing, but why not starting this in the art and spreading it to other parts of the life? And I know there are also other people who are aware of it. And as an institutionalized, we have also in our school giving safe spaces to refugees. In former times to those of Syria, and nowadays to those from Ukraine or also from Russia who come and were not so content or were oppressed by their system. And so I think it's very good to work also for this side. It's part of my job to be also aware about this, and it's sort of political side of my job, and I like this very much. To my own art, I would say everything I develop in my art comes from painting. My interest, or my original interest, is painting. How creating an analog piece. But at the same time, everything I'm interested in further becomes part of this work. And very often I like that other people take in a way part of my work. I can just give one example because painting is something I love mostly doing on my own in the studio, but I miss then the contact to the world. And so sometimes I do projects in which I invite people to talk together, for example, about our mother-daughter relationships. And I made a work, it's called Together. The starting point was this conversation about mother-daughter relationships, and also in a way, not so nice parts of it, like this family problems, but not in it's personal stories that are told, like oral history sentences, but at the same time it shows something about the roles of mother and daughter and what is expected of them, and especially what is expected from the mother role, and what is perhaps it's also against this expectation, this work, without knowing it before. So it's about, on the one hand, about the relationship between mothers and daughters, but on the other hand, about building a group, talking about a subject. And I tried then to make this visible on paintings that are hybrids between tables and paintings. So they are installed like tables, like on 2 feet or 4 feet, and but at the same time the surface and the sides are completely painted with sometimes the sentences of what was told of the community who spoke about this subject, and on the other hand I painted traces of using a table, like of dots made by tea or coffee, or dots or other traces, like movements you use as a housewife, as a traditional role of housewife, but doing it as painting, like sweeping or what else, like scrapping or making dots and all this stuff that is combined normally to thinking about household gestures. I used them as painting gestures then. So it's in a way it's perhaps also underlining or subversive use of role understandings and breaking them up into another context. And perhaps that's an important part of my work, that I want to reflect or to question norms, or not accepting norms, but showing not normative, what is usually told as not normative, but showing it in a quite usual way because it's part of life. For example, this border between tidiness and untidiness, that is also one very big subject of my work. I portraited persons who live in not in flats that are in a normative sense not so tidy, but I think it's a very special manner of tidiness, even if it's in a way neglected socially, but I understand. I did not paint the persons who are living in the flats, but I painted as a portrait only the stuff they are surrounding themselves with. And it's people from very different parts of society, but all in a way friends of mine or people I have been working with. And for me it was very important to give this space to these portraits. It's sort of collections of many. I myself, it was a sort of artistic concept, is a little bit too much, but I adapted the manner of collecting stuff in painting the collected stuff and collecting myself, my own paintings, and stapling them into the exhibition spaces. As just to give an example what I'm working on. So this means my work has also in a way a political side, but it's not a message in this case, but it comes out through the medium of painting and installation or conceptual work. Yes, I can say with a very big yes. I am a feminist, I'm a queer feminist, and so for me being a feminist is a quite wide range. It's not only fighting for the rights for women, but fighting for the rights for all people who are in a way seen not much enough. And it's quite interesting perhaps because 30 years ago I was asked by a member of a scholarship in which I was participating. It was a scholarship for women. It's called Goldrausch Künstlerinnenprojekt in Berlin. It was a support for women becoming less shy to talk about one's own art. And at that time I was asked by a Korean participant, "Are you a feminist?" And then I said, I cannot really say if I can yes to this question. But meanwhile, many things changed, I think, already since she put me the question. Since 1 year later, I was very aware that everything I do is more or less what I do in my art is influenced by being a queer feminist. And I have many friends, especially in Belgium, who are feminists, and I know very old feminists here in Berlin, who are 86 years old. It's one of our friends. he had the first professorship here at the University TU it's that what we call today gender studies, but it was called women's studies or something similar. I don't really know how it was called. But I think it's even today it's a quite different question as, for example, like 5 or 10 years ago, because there is very often in society this separation now between feminists who don't, some who say we don't want to be queer feminists, and others say, but we want to be queer feminists and we don't want to exclude anyone. Perhaps this is a little bit becomes a new problem which we have not thought about before. But so I am a feminist, a queer feminist.